The weight of silence. The soft glow of her monitor was the only light left on the entire floor. Priya Sharma's fingers moved methodically across her keyboard, the steady rhythm interrupted only by occasional clicks of her mouse. At 28, she was one of the most talented graphic designers at Horizon Marketing, but tonight her usual creative spark felt dimmed by exhaustion. Just one more hour, she whispered to herself, rubbing her temples. The office had emptied hours ago, the usual buzz of activity replaced by an eerie silence that made her aware of every small sound. The hum of the air conditioning, the distant elevator chime, her own unsteady breathing. Her phone buzzed, and Priya's heart sank when she saw the hospital's number flashing on her screen. "Hello? This is Priya Sharma." The voice on the other end was sympathetically professional. "Ms. Sharma, I'm calling about your grandmother's treatment plan. The insurance company has denied the specialized therapy we discussed. We'll need to discuss alternative payment options." Priya closed her eyes, the walls of her carefully constructed composure beginning to crack. Since the stroke 3 months ago, her grandmother, the woman who had raised her after her parents' death, needed constant care. The mounting medical bills had already drained Priya's savings, and now this. "I understand. Can I come by tomorrow to discuss this?" She managed, her voice remarkably steady despite the storm brewing inside. After ending the call, Priya stared at the design she'd been working on, an advertisement celebrating family connections for a luxury watch brand. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was, creating images of perfect families with unlimited resources while her own family was falling apart. Something broke inside her then. A single tear escaped, then another until she couldn't stop them. She buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. In the emptiness of the vast open office, she finally allowed herself this moment of honesty, this admission of fear and exhaustion she'd been hiding from everyone. She didn't hear the soft footsteps approaching from the corridor leading to the executive offices. She didn't notice the tall figure pause at the edge of the designer bullpen. Observing her with unexpected concern, Aiden Nakamura, Horizon's notoriously demanding creative director, stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Known for his exacting standards and intimidating critiques, he rarely engaged with staff beyond professional necessities. But something about Priya's solitary anguish made him hesitate, caught between his usual detachment and an unexpected impulse to approach. For a moment that stretched into eternity, he watched her, the brilliant designer whose work consistently impressed him, now revealed as heartbreakingly human. Then, making a decision that would alter both their lives, he stepped forward into the pool of light surrounding her desk. The man behind the reputation Aiden Nakamura had grown accustomed to being feared. At 36, his reputation as Horizon's brilliant but uncompromising creative director preceded him in every room. The whispers followed him down hallways. How he'd rejected an entire campaign days before launch. How he'd reduced interns to tears with his cutting critiques. How he demanded nothing short of perfection. What no one knew was how lonely it was at the top of that particular mountain. Tonight, he'd stayed late reviewing quarterly portfolios, finding himself drawn most consistently to Priya Sharma's work. There was something in her designs that spoke of deeper understanding, an emotional intelligence that elevated her graphics beyond mere technical excellence. It was this quality that had kept him from reprimanding her when she missed last week's team meeting. "You're getting soft, Nakamura," he muttered to himself, gathering his things to leave when he noticed the solitary light in the designer section. The sight of Priya crying had stopped him cold. Aiden recognized true despair when he saw it. It was an old companion he knew intimately. For 3 years after his father's suicide, he'd carried that same weight, hidden behind immaculate suits and professional detachment. Even now, the anniversary of that day, just 2 weeks past, had left him raw in ways no one at Horizon could possibly suspect. He approached her desk quietly, clearing his throat softly to avoid startling her. "Miss Sharma?" Priya's head snapped up, her eyes wide with mortification as she frantically wiped at her tears. "Mr. Nakamura, I'm so sorry, I'm finishing the Chronos watch layouts. It's almost midnight," he said, his voice gentler than anyone at Horizon had ever heard it. "Whatever you're working on can wait until morning." She blinked at him, clearly caught between fear and confusion at this unexpected version of the man everyone dreaded disappointing. "Are you okay?" he asked, the simple question hanging between them like something fragile. I'm fine, she answered automatically, the professional mask sliding back into place. Just tired? I should go home. Aiden recognized the deflection. He'd perfected it himself years ago. He should accept it, maintain professional boundaries, and walk away. Instead, he surprised himself by pulling up a chair from a nearby desk. When I was 24, he said quietly, I worked 3 jobs while trying to finish design school. I slept maybe 4 hours a night for 2 years straight. Priya stared at him, her professional composure momentarily forgotten. The great Aiden Nakamura never spoke about himself. His personal life was a complete mystery to everyone at Horizon. Why are you telling me this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because I recognize what burning out while trying to carry the world looks like, he replied simply, and because I've found that pretending everything's fine only works until it doesn't. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows across his face. For the first time, Priya noticed the faint lines around his eyes, the slight slump to shoulders that usually appeared perfectly squared. I don't know what to do anymore, she admitted, the words escaping before she could stop them. My grandmother needs specialized care I can't afford, and I'm running out of options. Aiden nodded, his expression thoughtful rather than judgmental. Sometimes there are resources we don't know about. He glanced at her computer screen. Your Chronos design, it's exceptional. You understand connection in ways most designers don't. The unexpected compliment caught her off guard. In 18 months at Horizon, he'd never directly praised her work. Thank you, she said softly. Go home, Ms. Sharma, he said, standing up. Rest. Things have a way of looking different in the morning. As he walked away, Priya couldn't help but feel she'd glimpsed something rare. The man behind the reputation. A person with depths no one at Horizon had been allowed to see before tonight. Bridges built in twilight. 3 days after their midnight encounter, Priya found herself staying late again. This time, however, it wasn't work that kept her behind. It was the stack of medical forms and financial assistance applications spread across her desk. The office provided better internet and printer access than her small apartment, and she'd grown accustomed to using the quiet after hours to handle her grandmother's paperwork. She didn't expect to see Aiden again, assuming their moment of connection had been an anomaly. So when the elevator chimed and he stepped onto the floor carrying 2 paper cups, Priya quickly attempted to hide the medical forms under design mock-ups. I thought you might still be here, he said, placing 1 cup on her desk. It's chai. The place downstairs makes it decently enough. Priya stared at the cup, then at him, trying to reconcile this gesture with the man whose critical feedback could make or break careers. Thank you, she said hesitantly. Aiden's eyes flickered to the partially hidden papers. Hospital forms. She sighed, too tired to maintain pretenses. Yes, my grandmother needs specialized physical therapy. I'm trying to find programs that might help cover costs. My mother had a stroke when I was in college, he said quietly, leaning against the desk adjacent to hers. I spent more nights than I can count filling out exactly those kinds of forms. The revelation hung in the air between them. Did she recover? Priya asked. Partially. She never regained full speech, but she learned to paint instead. A smile softened his features. She'd never picked up a brush before, but afterward it became her voice. My grandmother was a classical dancer, Priya said, her eyes brightening for the first time in days. Before the stroke, she was still teaching young children in our community. Now she can barely stand without assistance. That's why your work captures movement so beautifully, Aiden observed. You understand the value of it. The simple insight that her designs reflected her grandmother's influence struck Priya deeply. No one had ever made that connection before. I never thought about it that way, she admitted. Twilight deepened outside the windows, casting the office in soft blues and purples. In this in-between light, they were neither boss and employee nor strangers, but 2 people finding unexpected common ground. The Sunder Foundation has a specialized grant program for cultural practitioners requiring medical care, Aiden said after a moment. They focus on preserving artistic heritage by supporting artists facing health challenges. I've never heard of them, Priya said, hope cautiously blooming. Most people haven't. He pulled out his phone, sending her an email with a single tap. Their application deadline is next week. I've sent you the contact information. Their eyes met, and Priya realized he wasn't offering charity. He was sharing knowledge one caretaker might offer another. A bridge built not of pity but of shared experience. "Thank you, Aiden," she said, using his first name without thinking. He didn't correct her. Instead, he nodded, a quiet understanding passing between them as the city lights began to flicker on beyond the glass. Beyond glass walls, 2 weeks later, Priya's grandmother was accepted into the Sunder Foundation's medical assistance program. The foundation not only covered her specialized therapy, but also connected her with a cultural preservation project where she could mentor young dancers from her hospital room via video calls. The joy in her grandmother's eyes during those sessions brought Priya more relief than any medical treatment could provide. What Priya didn't know was that Aiden had personally called the foundation's director, Renata Wong, an old college classmate, to highlight her grandmother's contribution to traditional dance. Not out of pity or to win Priya's affection, but because he genuinely believed in preserving artistic legacies. Their interactions at Horizon shifted subtly. While maintaining professionalism during meetings, they began sharing small moments, a knowing glance when a client made an impossible request, a shared coffee in the break room, design books left on each other's desks with post-it notes marking interesting pages. On a rainy Tuesday evening, Priya found herself invited to Aiden's glass-walled office to discuss a particularly challenging campaign. "Your concept for the children's hospital rebrand is compelling," he said, gesturing to her design spread across his desk, "but I think there's something deeper you're reaching for here." Rather than feeling criticized, Priya felt seen. "I want the parents to feel hope when they see it, not just institutional comfort." "Exactly." He moved beside her, not touching but close enough that she could smell his subtle cologne. "When my father died, the hospital walls felt like they were closing in. Design matters in spaces of suffering." The personal admission caught her off guard. They'd shared stories of caring for family members, but this was different, a vulnerability offered without prompting. "I'm sorry about your father," she said quietly. "It was a long time ago," he replied, his eyes meeting hers, "but it shapes my approach to design, just like your grandmother shapes yours." Outside the glass walls of his office, a few late workers moved through the open floor plan, oblivious to the moment unfolding between the creative director and the graphic designer. "Would you like to see some of my grandmother's dance recordings?" Priya asked impulsively. "I've been digitizing her old performances. There's this one piece about resilience that might inspire the hospital campaign." Aiden's smile reached his eyes, a rare sight at Horizon. "I'd like that very much." As they stood together in his glass-walled office, surrounded by designs and the soft patter of rain, something shifted between them, a recognition that what was building went beyond professional respect or shared experience. It was the tentative foundation of something neither had been looking for, yet both desperately needed. Hearts unveiled. 3 months after their first late-night encounter, Priya and Aiden found themselves at a crossroads. Their professional collaboration had blossomed into the agency's most successful campaign quarter, with clients specifically requesting the Nakamura-Sharma approach to their brands. But the undercurrent of their personal connection had become impossible to ignore, especially to their colleagues. "People are talking," Priya said one evening as they walked through a small gallery, showcasing her grandmother's archival dance photographs, alongside other cultural artists. The Sunder Foundation had organized the exhibition, with proceeds benefiting their medical assistance program. "Does that bother you?" Aiden asked, his hands in his pockets as he studied a black and white image of her grandmother in mid-pirouette, face alight with joy. "Not the talking," she admitted. "The uncertainty. I've built my career on solid ground, and this feels like stepping into space without knowing if there's something to catch you," he finished. She nodded, grateful for his understanding. They'd spent enough evenings together now, discussing design over dinner, visiting her grandmother, sharing stories of their pasts, that they'd developed a language of their own. "I've lived behind glass walls for a long time, Priya," Aiden said quietly, "building a reputation on perfectionism because I was afraid to let anyone see the mess underneath. The failures, the grief." They paused before a photograph of her grandmother teaching young children, her hands gently guiding small arms into proper position. "When my father died, I promised myself I'd never be vulnerable again," he continued. "But watching your grandmother, how she's embraced a new way of dancing, of teaching. It's reminded me that there's strength in adaptation. In letting yourself be seen, Priya turned to him, realizing he was offering her not just his heart, but his trust. Something far more valuable from a man who'd spent years hiding behind professional detachment. I'm scared too, she confessed. Not just about work complications, about letting someone else carry part of my burdens when I've been handling everything alone for so long. Aiden took her hand, a public gesture that marked a private decision. Perhaps that's what love actually is. Not grand rescues or perfect solutions, but the willingness to stand together in imperfect moments. Beyond the gallery windows, the city lights shimmered against the darkening sky. Inside, surrounded by images of dancers who had adapted their art through generations, two people who had spent their lives carrying others found the courage to lean on each other instead. I'm willing if you are, Priya said softly. Aiden's smile, once so rare at Horizon, now came easily in her presence. I think I've been willing since I saw you crying at your desk. I just didn't know it yet. As they left the gallery hand in hand, the glass walls that had once defined their separate worlds became merely windows to a shared future, built on understanding that ran deeper than words.